Cancun is a bustling city filled with life and color. It's a popular tourist destination for a multitude of reasons, from an interactive aquarium to exploring the region's history. It has something for everybody. It's a place where anybody can go with your friends or family, with roughly 5.6 million Americans alone traveling to Cancun in 2022. Just like any other big city, crime happens. According to Numbeo, it has an average crime index of 55.73 and a safety scale of 44.27, with corruption and bribery being the largest problem, being at 72.80. It doesn't necessarily mean that going there is a danger zone. In comparison, New Orleans has a crime index of 67.13 and a safety scale of 32.87. It's relatively safer to walk on the streets of Cancun than it is in New Orleans. Regardless, the Mexican government still highly advises people not to walk alone. Although you're less likely to be attacked if you're a tourist, just like any other place, danger lurks in the shadows for anyone who makes themselves vulnerable. It's always good to have a buddy system in place when going out on the streets. When you do see somebody walking by themselves, you might not think much to yourself. Maybe a simple, "Why is that person walking alone?" or "I hope that person is safe." But what goes through your mind when you see a 2-year-old toddler walking by themselves on the streets of Cancun? This is the disappearance of Tahnee Shanks. On May 2nd, 2022, a toddler was found walking alone on the Cancun streets, catching the attention of passerbys. People immediately went on high alert and approached her in hopes of helping her find her parents. She did not appear to be scared or crying and was holding a flashlight. She also had blood on the corner of her pinky finger as well, something to keep note of later in the video. According to the people who found her, she smelled like baby soap, as if she had been recently bathed. When asked about her parents or where she came from, it was difficult to flesh out her answers since she spoke half English, half Spanish. And with her being merely a toddler and still learning how to form words together, she mostly spoke gibberish. Witnesses claimed that they saw somebody dumped her near the Chapel of San Archangel and left the area. From there, she wandered on her own away from the church. There was another witness who had claimed that a man approached him and asked if he knew her, to which the witness said no. That man later said he would go off and search for her parents, though he never returned. With absolutely nothing else to go off of, the people who found her went to the internet for help, taking photos of the little girl and spreading it across social media in hopes of it reaching her parents. Photos of her were spread all across Facebook. These are the photos that were taken on the night she was found. You can see her holding the small flashlight in her hand, as well as being held by a stranger to keep her safe. It's not confirmed where she got the flashlight or why she was holding it in the first place. It can be assumed that it already belonged to her before she was abandoned by the church. She also clearly does not seem to be afraid or entirely aware of the situation that she is in. People who saw the post did their due diligence and shared the post so that the girl can be reunited with her family. Everyone came together to help this one girl find her parents. All of this work came to fruition when somebody who was scrolling through his feed ran into this post and recognized the toddler. This man had reasons to believe that he knew this girl, and it was because he used to date her mother, Tahnee Shanks. Not only that, but he already had a feeling that something was going on. He thought it was suspicious that she suddenly stopped posting on social media, but tried not to think about it too much as she may have been too occupied. However, his nightmares became a reality when he saw her daughter all by herself on the busy streets. He immediately reached out to her family, who lives across the world in Australia. Tahnee Shanks is a 32-year-old woman who grew up in Whitsundays, Australia, and was living with her mother, Leanne, and 3 brothers, Daniel and Ben. Their third brother has not been publicly named and had recently passed away under unknown circumstances a few years before Shanks' disappearance. She was described as a very outgoing and talkative person who was always happy to help others. Before she moved to Mexico, she worked as an assistant nurse for the elderly and found the job rewarding. She was never able to sit still and had the urge to travel, which she loved more than anything. She even described herself on her socials as a, quote, happy hippie ginger veering around the world one country at a time. At 18 years old, she traveled by herself for the first time around Asia and parts of Europe to do volunteer work. She got through her travels by couch surfing. From this trip alone, she fell in love with traveling, so much so that 2 years later, she traveled again, but this time around Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and the United States before ultimately settling in Mexico. She moved there with her boyfriend at the time, the same one who reached out to her family about her daughter, but had broken up after moving to the country and went their separate ways. Since the disappearance, she had lived in Mexico for 9 years, and right before she was declared as missing, she was living in Merida because Cancun was, according to her brother, Dan, getting too dangerous. But even escaping the city wasn't enough for her to run away from danger. She then got into a relationship with 32-year-old Jorge Luis Aguirre Estudillo and had a child with him, the same little girl who was found by herself. Not much is known about his childhood. What is known is that he temporarily lived in the United States but was deported back to Mexico after attacking a police officer. And in Yucatan, his ex-girlfriend had filed a domestic violence complaint. He was known for being an alleged fraudster via selling fake holiday packages. The most notable aspect to Estudillo is that he was allegedly linked to the cartel, a claim made by Quintana Roo General Attorney Oscar Montes de Oca Rosales. Supposedly, somebody, who has not been publicly named, had threatened him. He was so scared for his life that he even hired a bodyguard. Estudillo was known for being verbally and emotionally abusive. Although he has not laid a hand on Shanks, she has stated to a friend before that she didn't want to wait for that anger to turn into that, showing that he was slowly becoming more and more violent. He would constantly get drunk and scream at her out of anger. There was an instance where he was so drunk that he was threatening to kick her out. It became so violent that she had to lock herself in their daughter's bedroom. Unfortunately, as much as she wanted to leave, she was financially dependent on him, which is why she stayed with him up until now. Their relationship ended after she discovered he was in an affair and even got the affair partner pregnant. This was enough for her to finally decide to leave him and separate. She made plans to move back to Australia to live with her family on June 16, 2022. She had openly expressed excitement on social media to finally introduce her side of the family to her daughter, who has never been to Australia before. Estudillo signed an agreement to allow his daughter to move to Australia, though he was under the assumption that they were only going to go on vacation, not permanently live there. It's unknown what his reaction was once he found out, but you can only imagine how a violent person would react. Her plans were going smoothly for months, such as her daughter receiving her Australian citizenship and was scheduled to get her passport on the 7th. Unfortunately, her plans were put on a halt when the pandemic hit and had no choice but to prolong her stay with her abusive ex-partner. This was also around the time when she found out that he was cheating on her, which shattered their relationship even more. It was then around this time that they would go on vacation for the last time before their flight to Australia. It's unknown who suggested, but what is known is that right before they went on their trip, Shanks had sent an ominous message to her friend on WhatsApp, warning them about her ex-partner. Her message reads, "I know this is gonna sound weird, but keep his name, Jorge Luis Aguirre Estudillo. Just in case anything happens to me, they can go after him. Not that anything will, but I just want to keep that as a backup." Everything seemed normal at the beginning. The three seemingly were enjoying their vacation, even sending pictures of their time at El Cuyo, and had made plans to go to Tulum, which was 116 miles away or 187 kilometers. The last time Daniel had contact with his sister was on May 5th at 12:40 p.m. Australian time, which was April 30th at 9:40 p.m. in Mexico. It was all through text. Shanks was the type of person who would prefer to talk via video calls, so it was strange when she didn't want to do just that with her brother, citing that it was due to the poor reception. Knowing his own sister better than anyone else, he knew this was strange. I was a bit suspect on the messages, and then all of a sudden they just stopped. Whereas normally I can't shut her up. I've usually got to stop messaging her. What was stranger was that she had also stopped posting on her social media as well. She was always posting their location and pictures, but when her family heard nothing, they knew something happened. However, they were on the other side of the world and were unable to reach her. The most that they could do was wait to hear back from her. There were receipts of them booking a hotel for one night in Cancun and were seen in CCTV cameras leaving the place in their white UTE. It was presumed that they were heading back to Merida on May 2nd. The four-wheel drive passed a toll booth 30 miles, or 32 kilometers, outside of Cancun when the car did a sudden U-turn back to Cancun through a back road. That was the last ping from Jorge's phone. 8 hours after they passed the toll booth, that was when their daughter was found wandering alone. After tying this all together, witnesses had claimed that the person who supposedly dumped her was confirmed to be Jorge since he matched the description. If you can recall, there was another witness who claimed a man came up to him and had asked if he knew where her parents were. He had also confirmed that the man matched Jorge's descriptions. None of this has officially been confirmed by the police, however, so take these witness accounts with a grain of salt. Once they were notified of her daughter's discovery, they immediately packed their bags and flew to Mexico to pick her up and help with the search of Tahnee. Daniel believed that there was no way his sister would just abandon her daughter like that. She was the type of mother who would fight anyone to keep her daughter by her side. Not only that, but he knew that she would never voluntarily leave because they had made plans to release their brother's ashes at their childhood camp on Stradbroke Island. She would never miss an event as important as that. Officials were eventually notified of this, so public appeals were made by the Mexican and Australian police, which were translated with the help of Shanks' daughter's pediatrician concerning Shanks' disappearance. Her daughter was put under the care of the Mexican Social Services. Meanwhile, Leanne, Shanks' mother, and Ben flew to the country. They made attempts to reach out to Estudillo, but to no avail. However, they were able to get into contact with the affair partner, who seemingly couldn't provide much information that can further push the case. While the family tried to get her child under their custody, the police were occupied with trying to figure out what exactly happened to the couple. They broke through their apartment door in search of more information, but were unable to find anything useful. They left one police to guard the apartment in hopes that Estudillo would show up, but he never reappeared. The family were very antsy about Shanks' whereabouts. It didn't help that people were sharing their witness stories to them either. There was one person who claimed they saw her with 5 people, 3 men and 2 women. Shanks seemingly appeared to have been intoxicated by drugs, and the group she was with were Mexican, aside from one of the women who had red hair. This story has also never been confirmed to be true either. Even though the police were investigating their disappearance, the family were unsatisfied with their efforts. They had noticed that Shanks' daughter had blood on her pinky finger. She appeared to have no injuries which could have resulted her to bleed, nor did the police ever confirm whether or not the blood belonged to somebody else. They also noticed that she was wearing new clothes. Her old clothes were tossed out and replaced with new ones, which the family thought was a bad move since her clothes could have been confiscated as evidence that could help them start somewhere. They could have tested it to see if they could find anything microscopic that seemed out of place. Unfortunately, the family's complaints weren't heard by the police as they focused on their own investigation. No further information came in regarding the old clothes or the blood. There was a white pickup truck found in the town of Puerto Morelos caught up in flames and burnt to a crisp. The number plates were removed and the serial number was nowhere to be found. However, based on the shadow of the last four digits, they were able to confirm that the vehicle belonged to the missing couple. Unfortunately, no bodies were found in or near the truck. On January 2023, the police received new but unspecified evidence that led them to believe that Shanks and Estudillo were led to the jungle near a housing unit in southern Cancun to be killed by a third party. It was to be believed that they were buried in clandestine graves. A heavily armed team, including the State Attorney General's Office, Investigative Police, Quintana Roo Police, the National Guard, Secretary of National Defense, trekked through the area with cadaver dogs in hopes of finding the couple, dead or alive. However, this led to nowhere, and they were unable to locate them. And this is where the case currently stands. There have been no new breakthroughs since then. The family are left with no answers to the disappearance of Tahnee Shanks and have no choice but to push forward for her daughter. During the process to get Shanks' daughter under their custody, it became a tough roadblock to pass. The social services refused to release her since they needed to provide proof that they were related. Not only that, but the Mexican embassy would not allow her to leave since she was a vital piece of the puzzle to the couple's disappearance. The family kept in contact with the Australian embassy and were determined to have her in their arms. Eventually, they released her and were finally able to take her home, where she is now safe in living her best life in Australia. However, the same cannot be said about Tahnee Shanks. She remains missing till this day, including her ex-partner Jorge Estudillo. What is left for those who still follow this case are theories. The first theory is that this was a result of the cartel. As mentioned earlier, Estudillo allegedly had ties to the cartel, even fearing for his life after being threatened. It can be believed that he got on the wrong side, and as an act of revenge, they ambushed them in the middle of their vacation, released their daughter before leading them to the jungle to be killed. It could explain why their truck made a sharp turn back to Cancun. They were possibly being tailed and were trying to outrun them, only to meet their end. In order to avoid trailing the murders back to the cartel, they set the car aflame to get rid of any possible evidence. The second theory is one that most people stand behind, including me. There's a possibility that Estudillo had something to do with their disappearance. Shanks had brought it up before that he was emotionally and mentally abusive, but never laid a hand on her. However, it was believed that physical abuse was inevitable since his violent temper showed no signs of slowing down. Not only that, but she had even gone through lengths to let her friend be aware of the off chance that if something were to happen to her, to keep his name in mind. The idea is that after finding out that she was planning on moving back to Australia with their child, he became enraged. Such as for any typical abusive partner, they cannot fathom losing control over their victim. Toward the latter half of their trip, they got into a heated argument, made a sharp U-turn back to Cancun, killed Shanks, set their truck on fire to get rid of evidence, then released their daughter after being unable to end her life. It can be assumed that he fled, found a new identity, and is possibly living his life in disguise. This would make sense with all the witness accounts of a man following the young girl before disappearing. Not only that, but it would make more sense that he, her biological father, couldn't bring himself to harm her either. Whereas for a cartel, they would have no emotional strings tied to her to keep her alive, a possible witness to the murders. Despite this, the police still consider him as a missing person rather than a suspect. However, if they were able to locate him, the first thing they want to do is talk to him about the disappearance. In the end, the family is having a hard time not knowing what happened to their loved one. Daniel has stated before that the entire process has been very difficult. Not only did they lose a sibling a few years before that, they now lost another one. The worst part is that they don't know her whereabouts or what happened, which, in my opinion, is harder to process. The only two known people who would know what happened to her is Jorge Luis Aguirre Estudillo, who is also still missing to this day, and their daughter, who was too young to even understand what was happening. But the family remains strong and has committed to raise Tahnee Shanks' daughter in her place, hoping that she would one day return to Australia. And that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching my third one. This case fascinated me that I just had to make a video on this. The thought of casually walking through the streets only to find a little girl by herself just terrifies me. I also can't imagine being in her shoes either. It was a little hard to put the story together chronologically since the articles were updating with new pieces of evidence each time. So please let me know if anything needs to be clarified. I really do hope that this case gets resolved soon since it's pretty straightforward who did it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.